The jungle breathes around Colonel Kiyono Ichiki as he kneels beside the muddy Tanaru River, studying the American positions through his field glasses. It's 2 a.m. on August 21st, 1942, and the humid Guadalcanal air clings to his uniform like a second skin. Behind him, 900 of Japan's most elite soldiers wait in perfect silence, veterans of China, Malaya, and the Philippines, men who have never tasted defeat. Ichiki adjusts his sword at his side, the familiar weight reassuring against his hip. For 6 months, the Americans have been running from Japanese steel across the Pacific. Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines, everywhere the rising sun appears, the Americans flee or surrender. These Marines on Guadalcanal will be no different. "Honorable Colonel," whispers his aide, Lieutenant Furukawa, crawling up beside him. "The men are ready. Henderson Field will be ours before dawn." Ichiki nods, watching the faint glow of cigarettes across the river, where American sentries smoke carelessly in their foxholes. Such indiscipline, such weakness. His lip curls in disgust. These are not the British soldiers we faced in Hong Kong, Furukawa-san. These are American weekend warriors, factory workers and farm boys playing at being soldiers. The sound of laughter drifts across the dark water from the Marine positions. Laughter. On the eve of battle, Ichiki has studied these Americans through intelligence reports. Soft civilians who enlisted after Pearl Harbor, barely 8 months of training between them, and the razor edge of Japanese Bushido. They'll break at the first banzai charge, just like the others. But something about this jungle feels different. The darkness seems deeper here, more alive. Strange birds call from the canopy above, and the very air feels heavy with menace. Ichiki shakes off the feeling. Battlefield nerves, nothing more. He's led troops across 3 campaigns without losing a single engagement. His fingers trace the ancient characters etched into his katana handle. Honor in death, victory in life. Words his grandfather carried through the Russo-Japanese War, words that have never failed the Ichiki family. Tonight, they will carve a path through American flesh and restore Japanese honor to these cursed islands. "Signal the men," Ichiki commands, his voice barely audible above the jungle's whisper. "We attack in 1 hour. Tell them, no prisoners. These Americans must learn the price of defying the Emperor." As Furukawa crawls away to relay orders, Ichiki takes one last look through his field glasses. The American positions seem almost casual, too casual. Machine gun nests scattered seemingly at random, mortars positioned without apparent coordination. Either these Marines are complete amateurs, or... He pushes the thought away. There is no or. Japanese steel has never failed. Japanese courage has never wavered. These Americans are about to learn why the Empire of the Rising Sun has conquered half the AG Pacific. But as Ichiki settles back to wait for the attack signal, he cannot shake one disturbing question. Why aren't the Americans afraid? 6,000 miles away in Tokyo, the newspapers are already printing headlines about the coming victory. But here, in the suffocating darkness of Guadalcanal's jungle, Lieutenant Furukawa creeps between clusters of waiting soldiers, whispering final orders that taste like prayers. "Remember the code," he tells each group. "Death before dishonor. Victory or death. No retreat." The men nod silently, their faces painted with mud and determination. These aren't conscripts. They're the Ichiki detachment, handpicked from the elite 28th Infantry Regiment. Private Yamamoto clutches his rifle with hands that have never trembled in battle. Sergeant Tanaka runs his thumb along his bayonet edge, sharp enough to split silk. They are the sword of the Empire, and tonight they will cut deep. But across that narrow river, something unprecedented is happening in military history. Marine Sergeant Frank Few peers through the jungle darkness, his half-Cherokee blood singing with ancestral hunting instincts the Japanese cannot fathom. Beside him, Private Sid Phillips loads another belt of ammunition into his machine gun with the methodical precision of a farm boy who's spent his life fixing machinery that refuses to quit. You hear that? Few whispers to his foxhole partner. The jungle has gone quiet. Too quiet. Even the insects have stopped their nightly chorus. These aren't the weekend warriors Ichiki imagines. Phillips survived the Great Depression, watching his family lose everything, learning that sometimes you fight dirty or you don't eat. Few grew up hunting in Arizona mountains where one mistake means death, where patience and cunning matter more than courage. They're not fighting for emperor worship or ancestral honor. They're fighting to go home alive, and they're about to introduce the Japanese army to a kind of warfare that exists nowhere in their military manuals. Colonel Ichiki rises, his hand moving to his sword hilt in a gesture older than his grandfather's grandfather. Around him, 900 men prepare for what they believe will be the last banzai charge of a very short battle. They've practiced this moment 1,000 times. The swift river crossing, the coordinated assault, the terrified American retreat. But no one has told them that Marine Corps doctrine doesn't include retreating. Listen carefully, Ichiki addresses his battalion commanders in barely audible whispers. The American Marines are undisciplined individualists. They lack the spiritual strength of Japanese soldiers. When we charge with fixed bayonets, screaming the Emperor's name, their Western minds will break. They'll run like rabbits. His intelligence reports confirm everything he believes. These Americans come from a soft democracy where every man thinks he's special, where collective sacrifice is impossible. How can such men stand against soldiers raised on 2,000 years of samurai tradition? But across the water, machine gunner Art Pendleton is testing his weapon's traverse for the 100th time, calculating fields of fire with the cold precision of a Massachusetts factory worker who understands that machines either work perfectly or people die. His loader, Whitney Jacobs, arranges ammunition belts with obsessive care, because growing up poor taught him that wasting anything, even bullets, can get you killed. These Marines aren't thinking about emperors or democracy. They're thinking about the Japanese soldier who last week used a white flag to lure Colonel Goetge's patrol into an ambush, then beheaded the survivors and mutilated their bodies. They're thinking about Pearl Harbor, about friends who died in the Philippines, about a war they never wanted but now intend to finish. And they've spent weeks turning this river crossing into a killing ground. The Japanese military mind cannot comprehend what's waiting for them. Their Bushido code demands honor in battle, face-to-face combat where courage determines victory. But these Americans have no Bushido code. They have something more dangerous, the desperate ingenuity of men who refuse to lose. Hidden mortars are pre-sighted on the riverbank. Machine guns are positioned in interlocking fields of fire that will turn the water red. Flares wait to illuminate the killing ground. Even the barbed wire has been strung not to stop the Japanese, but to channel them into prepared killing zones. Private Jim Young adjusts his mortar sight one final time, remembering his father's words about hunting back in Ohio. Sometimes the deer thinks he's hunting you, son. That's when you find out who's really the predator. At 2:50 a.m., Colonel Ichiki gives the signal. 900 Japanese soldiers rise as one, their bayonets glinting in starlight, their voices joining in a war cry that has echoed across Asia for centuries. They surge toward the river with absolute confidence, certain that American nerve will shatter at the sound of Japanese steel. They have no idea they're about to encounter something their military philosophy never imagined. Americans who fight like the jungle itself, patient, brutal, and utterly without mercy. The first Japanese soldiers splash into the Tenaru River, and for just a moment, the night holds its breath. Then hell opens its mouth and swallows them whole. The first shot explodes from Marine Private Whitney Jacobs' rifle at exactly 2:51 a.m., shattering the tropical night like breaking glass. In that single muzzle flash, 2,000 years of Japanese military tradition collides with American firepower, and the collision destroys everything Colonel Ichiki thought he knew about warfare. Marine, tonight you die. The Japanese war cry splits the darkness as hundreds of elite soldiers plunge into the Tenaru River, their bayonets gleaming like silver lightning. They expect American panic, American retreat, American surrender. Instead, they get something that exists nowhere in their military manuals. They get Marines who fight like the jungle itself. Sergeant Art Pendleton's machine gun erupts first, its muzzle flash painting the riverbank in strobing orange light. Japanese soldiers, magnificent in their courage, perfect in their formation, charged directly into interlocking fields of fire that turn the shallow water into a slaughterhouse. Jesus Christ! Pendleton screams over the deafening roar of his gun. They just keep coming. But these aren't the scattered individual attacks Japanese doctrine expects from American individualists. This is coordinated violence on a scale that makes Bushido irrelevant. Every Marine weapon fires into predetermined killing zones. Mortar shells, pre-sighted days ago, begin falling with mathematical precision. Flares burst overhead, turning night into blazing day and silhouetting Japanese soldiers like targets in a shooting gallery. Colonel Ichiki watches in growing horror as his perfectly trained, perfectly disciplined soldiers are slaughtered not by American courage, but by American engineering. This isn't honor combat. This is industrial killing, and his men are the raw material. Private First Class Jim Young drops mortar shells down the tube as fast as his loader can hand them to him. Each explosion sends geysers of mud, water, and human flesh into the air. "We're not fighting soldiers," he shouts to his crew. "We're exterminating insects. The Japanese keep coming because Bushido demands it. Retreat is dishonor worse than death." But every step forward carries them deeper into a killing machine designed by men who learned warfare in the factories and farms of America. Men who understand that efficiency matters more than honor. Sergeant Frank Few, his Cherokee blood singing with predatory instincts, moves through the jungle like a ghost. When Japanese soldiers break through the river crossing, they find not retreating Americans, but individual Marines who hunt them in the darkness with techniques older than civilization. Few's knife finds 3 Japanese throats before they know death is among them. "This isn't war," gasps Lieutenant Furukawa, clutching a sucking chest wound as he watches his company disintegrate. "This is butchery." He's right. This is exactly what it is. The Americans fight without honor, without rules, without mercy. They use shotguns, weapons the Geneva Convention would later try to ban as too inhumane for warfare. They coordinate mortar fire like factory foremen coordinating assembly lines. They fight at night from concealment, using industrial violence against men trained for personal combat. And it's devastatingly effective. Colonel Ichiki, his perfect uniform now stained with mud and blood, realizes with crystalline horror that everything his military taught him is wrong. These Americans aren't fighting like soldiers. They're fighting like a machine. A killing machine that feeds on Japanese courage and excretes Japanese corpses. Private Al Schmid, his face half destroyed by grenade fragments, continues firing his machine gun even though he's been blinded. His loader shouts directions in his ear. "Left! Left! More left! Now fire!" The gun chatters endlessly, cutting down Japanese soldiers who die with perfect honor and perfect futility. "They're in the wire!" screams Corporal Johnny Rivers, watching Japanese soldiers tangle themselves in barbed wire that channels them directly into his gun's kill zone. His machine gun fires until the barrel glows red hot, until the water jacket boils, until the gun itself begins to melt from sustained fire. This is the moment when Japanese military philosophy meets American industrial capacity, and philosophy loses. The Japanese soldiers fight magnificently. They charge into machine gun fire without flinching. They leap over the bodies of their comrades and charge again. They scream the Emperor's name as bullets tear them apart. Their courage is absolute, their discipline perfect, their honor unquestionable. And it means absolutely nothing, because the Americans aren't fighting for honor. They're fighting to win. And winning means killing every Japanese soldier in the most efficient way possible. Private Sid Phillips watches through his mortar sight as Japanese soldiers, boys his own age from farms and cities thousands of miles away, are blown apart by American explosives. He feels no honor, no glory, no satisfaction, just the grim determination of a farm boy who understands that sometimes you have to kill what's trying to kill you. The river runs red. Japanese bodies pile 3 and 4 deep in the shallow water. The sound of American weapons never stops. Machine guns, mortars, rifles, shotguns, all firing in a coordinated symphony of destruction that turns elite Japanese soldiers into scattered meat. At 4:17 a.m., Colonel Ichiki commits seppuku. He doesn't die in glorious combat with an American bayonet. He doesn't fall leading a final charge. He dies alone in the jungle, disemboweling himself with his ancestral sword because he cannot face the truth. That American cowardice has just destroyed the finest soldiers Japan could produce. His suicide note, found days later, contains a single line: "We did not understand what we were fighting." By dawn, 890 Japanese soldiers lie dead along a 100-yard stretch of riverbank. The Marines lose 43 men. The mathematical brutality of the casualty ratio tells the entire story. This isn't warfare as the Japanese understand it. This is extermination. Sergeant Few walks among the Japanese bodies as morning light filters through the jungle canopy. Many of the dead soldiers are younger than he is. Their uniforms are neat, their equipment perfect, their weapons clean. They died like heroes from a different century, killed by men from the next one. Private Phillips stares at a Japanese soldier who can't be more than 17, his hand still clutching a photograph of what must be his family. The boy's eyes are open, staring at nothing, and Phillips realizes with sick certainty that this is what modern warfare looks like. Not honor and glory, but efficient slaughter. "God help us," whispers Corporal Pendleton, surveying the carnage his machine gun has created. "What have we become?" The answer hangs in the humid morning air, unspoken but understood by every Marine who survived the night. They've become exactly what they needed to become. Not heroes, not warriors, not soldiers fighting for noble causes. They've become killers, efficient, remorseless, utterly effective killers. And in the jungle hell of Guadalcanal, that's the only thing that matters. The photographs tell the story better than any military report ever could. Japanese bodies stacked like cordwood along the Tanaru River. American Marines standing among the carnage, not celebrating, not smiling, just staring with the hollow eyes of men who've discovered something terrible about themselves. The mathematical precision of modern slaughter laid bare in black and white. Private Frank Pomeroy, who survived the battle, would carry one image for the rest of his life: a Japanese officer's sword still clutched in its owner's death grip, reflecting the morning sun like an accusation. "We fought like animals," he wrote to his sister back in Massachusetts. And the worst part is, it worked. That letter captures the psychological transformation that Guadalcanal forced on American fighting men. They went into the jungle as civilized soldiers following rules of honorable combat. They came out as something else entirely. Men who understood that winning matters more than honor, that survival trumps glory, that efficient killing beats courageous dying every single time. The Japanese military machine, built on 2,000 years of samurai tradition, never recovered from that realization. Within weeks, intelligence reports from other Pacific battles began reflecting a new reality. Japanese soldiers, who had charged American positions with suicidal courage since Pearl Harbor, now hesitated. They dug deeper foxholes. They fought more defensively. The terrifying confidence that had carried them across Asia began to crack. Because word spreads quickly in any army, the Americans weren't fighting like civilized soldiers anymore. They were fighting like the jungle itself, patient, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson, who commanded the Marines at what became known as Bloody Ridge, received a letter from a captured Japanese officer that perfectly summarized the psychological impact of American jungle tactics. Your soldiers fight without honor, but they fight to win. We can no longer count on your weakness. That sentence represents one of the most important strategic shifts in military history. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japanese commanders had to plan for American competence instead of American cowardice. They had to assume that Marines would fight to the last man instead of surrendering. They had to prepare for battles of attrition instead of quick victories, and Japan's entire Pacific strategy was built on quick victories. The ripple effects extended far beyond Guadalcanal. At Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, Japanese defenders found themselves facing not the weekend warriors they expected, but professional killers who'd learned their trade in the jungles of the Solomons. Men who understood that war isn't about honor. It's about making the other guy die for his country. Marine Sergeant Sid Phillips, interviewed 50 years after the battle, put it simply. We went to Guadalcanal as boys playing soldier. We came back as men who knew how to kill efficiently. The Japanese never expected that transformation, and it cost them the war. But the cost extended beyond military strategy. The Marines who fought at Guadalcanal returned home carrying something dark and permanent in their souls. They discovered that civilized men could become savage killers when survival demanded it. They'd learned that courage without competence is just suicide, that honor without victory is just death. Most disturbing of all, they'd learned that they were very, very good at killing. Private Art Pendleton, whose machine gun had cut down hundreds of Japanese soldiers, never spoke about the battle to his children. When asked about his war service, he would only say, "We did what we had to do." His grandson found his war diary after Pendleton's death in 1987. The final entry, dated August 22, 1942, contains just 4 words, "God forgive us all." Today, military historians study Guadalcanal as the moment when American forces learned to match Japanese ferocity with industrial efficiency. But the real lesson runs deeper than tactics or strategy. Guadalcanal proved that civilization is a thin veneer, easily stripped away when survival is at stake. It demonstrated that ordinary men, farmers, factory workers, store clerks, can become extraordinarily effective killers when properly motivated. The Japanese soldiers who died at the Tenaru River were brave, disciplined, and honorable. They died for emperor and country with perfect courage. But courage isn't enough when your enemy has abandoned honor for efficiency, when your opponent fights not for glory, but for survival. In the end, that's the lesson written in Japanese blood along a jungle river on an obscure Pacific island. Sometimes the side that fights dirtiest is the side that goes home alive. And in 1942, going home alive was the only victory that mattered.